10 Biggest Smugglers. 1. The Pablo Escobar Drug Empire. The story of Pablo Escobar is a striking example of how crime, power, and ambition can reshape a country. As the leader of the Medellin cartel, he created one of the largest drug smuggling empires in history. In the late 1970s, Escobar saw an opportunity in the growing demand for cocaine, especially in the United States. What started as small-scale smuggling quickly turned into a massive operation. By the 1980s, his cartel was transporting tons of cocaine every week, using planes, hidden compartments in cars, and even secret jungle airstrips. At its peak, the Medellin cartel controlled most of the global cocaine trade. Escobar's success wasn't just about logistics, it was about control. He built a network of corruption that reached deep into politics, law enforcement, and the judiciary. His infamous phrase, plata o plomo, forced people to choose between taking his money or facing violence. This ruthless strategy allowed him to operate with near impunity for years. Yet, Escobar also crafted a public image that confused many. In poor communities, he funded housing projects, sports fields, and schools. To some, he appeared as a benefactor. To others, he was a symbol of fear and destruction. The cost of his empire was devastating. Colombia experienced waves of violence, including bombings, assassinations, and widespread instability. Thousands lost their lives as the government struggled to regain control. By the early 1990s, Escobar's power began to collapse under pressure from authorities and rival groups. In 1993, he was killed, bringing an end to his reign, but not to the global drug trade. Why Escobar is one of the biggest smugglers, built a global cocaine distribution network, earned billions annually at peak power, used innovative and large-scale smuggling methods, influenced politics and society through fear and money. His empire remains a powerful, cautionary tale of how illegal markets can grow beyond control, and the lasting consequences they leave behind. 2. The French Connection. The French Connection was one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations of the 20th century. Active during the 1960s and early 1970s, it connected continents in a dangerous chain that brought heroin from Turkey to the streets of the United States. The story begins in Turkey, where opium poppies were grown and processed into morphine. From there, the product was secretly transported to laboratories in Marseille. In these hidden labs, skilled chemists refined morphine into high-quality heroin, making it incredibly valuable on the global market. But the real genius and danger of the French Connection was its smuggling system. The heroin was carefully concealed in luggage, cars, and even everyday goods, then shipped across the Atlantic. Once it reached cities like New York City, it was distributed through organized crime networks. At its peak, this network supplied a large percentage of the heroin consumed in the United States. It relied heavily on corruption, secrecy, and international cooperation among criminal groups. Law enforcement agencies struggled for years to track and dismantle it due to its complexity. The operation finally began to collapse in the early 1970s, thanks to coordinated international efforts between American and European authorities. Stricter controls on opium production in Turkey and aggressive policing in France played a major role in shutting down the pipeline. The French Connection later became widely known through the film The French Connection, which dramatized the intense efforts to stop the smugglers. Why it's among the biggest smuggling operations, spanned multiple countries and continents, supplied a major share of US heroin demand, used advanced concealment and transport methods, involved organized crime networks and corruption. This network shows how global and organized drug trafficking had already become decades ago, leaving a legacy that still influences modern smuggling operations today. 3. Operation Green Ice. The French Connection was one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations of the 20th century. Active during the 1960s and early 1970s, it connected continents in a dangerous chain that brought heroin from Turkey to the streets of the United States. The story begins in Turkey, where opium poppies were grown and processed into morphine. From there, the product was secretly transported to laboratories in Marseille. In these hidden labs, skilled chemists refined morphine into high-quality heroin, making it incredibly valuable on the global market. But the real genius and danger of the French Connection was its smuggling system. The heroin was carefully concealed in luggage, cars, and even everyday goods, then shipped across the Atlantic. Once it reached cities like New York City, it was distributed through organized crime networks. At its peak, this network supplied a large percentage of the heroin consumed in the United States. It relied heavily on corruption, secrecy, and international cooperation among criminal groups. Law enforcement agencies struggled for years to track and dismantle it due to its complexity. The operation finally began to collapse in the early 1970s, thanks to coordinated international efforts between American and European authorities. Stricter controls on opium production in Turkey and aggressive policing in France played a major role in shutting down the pipeline. The French Connection later became widely known through the film The French Connection, which dramatized the intense efforts to stop the smugglers. Why it's among the biggest smuggling operations, spanned multiple countries and continents, supplied a major share of US heroin demand, used advanced concealment and transport methods, involved organized crime networks and corruption. This network shows how global and organized drug trafficking had already become decades ago, leaving a legacy that still influences modern smuggling operations today. 4. The Barry Seal Smuggling Operation. The story of Barry Seal reads like a high-risk thriller. A skilled pilot turned smuggler, Seal became one of the key figures in transporting cocaine into the United States during the 1980s. Seal's journey began in aviation. With exceptional flying skills, he quickly realized he could use his talents for more than legal work. He started working with powerful Colombian cartels, including the network led by Pablo Escobar. His role was simple in theory, but dangerous in practice. Fly large quantities of cocaine from Central and South America into the US without getting caught. Using small aircraft, Seal developed clever smuggling techniques. He flew at low altitudes to avoid radar, landed on remote airstrips, and often operated at night. Planes were packed with drugs, sometimes carrying hundreds of kilos in a single trip. Over time, these missions added up to tons of cocaine entering the country. What made Seal stand out was not just the scale, but the speed and efficiency of his operation. He turned smuggling into a well-organized system, making him incredibly valuable to cartel leaders. At his peak, he earned millions of dollars, becoming one of the most successful smugglers of his time. However, the risks were always closing in. Seal was eventually caught by US authorities. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he became an informant, secretly helping to expose major cartel operations. This decision put him in extreme danger. In 1986, Seal was assassinated, marking a dramatic end to his life and career. Why Barry Seal is among the biggest smugglers. Transported massive quantities of cocaine into the US. Used advanced flying techniques to evade detection. Worked directly with major Colombian cartels. Played a key role in exposing drug networks later on. His story highlights the thin line between skill and crime, and how quickly power in the smuggling world can turn into danger. 5. The Silk Road Marketplace. The rise of Silk Road changed the face of modern smuggling. Unlike traditional drug empires built on planes and hidden routes, this operation existed entirely online, hidden deep within the dark web. Created in 2011 by Ross Ulbricht, Silk Road was designed as a marketplace where people could buy and sell goods anonymously. Using encryption tools and the cryptocurrency Bitcoin, users could trade without revealing their identities. While the platform offered various items, it quickly became known for global drug trading. Sellers from around the world listed substances, while buyers placed orders from their homes. Instead of smugglers physically transporting drugs across borders, packages were shipped through standard postal systems, often disguised as ordinary items. This made detection much harder and allowed the operation to scale rapidly. Silk Road operated like a legitimate e-commerce site. It had user reviews, ratings, and even customer service. This structure built trust among users and helped the marketplace grow quickly. At its peak, it facilitated millions of dollars in transactions, connecting thousands of buyers and sellers worldwide. However, the same technology that made Silk Road powerful also left traces. Law enforcement agencies spent years tracking digital footprints, eventually identifying Ulbricht. In 2013, he was arrested and the site was shut down. Why Silk Road is among the biggest smuggling operations. Enabled global drug trade through the internet, used anonymity tools and cryptocurrency, replaced traditional smuggling routes with postal delivery, handled massive volumes of illegal transactions. Silk Road marked a turning point in criminal history. It showed that smuggling no longer needed physical networks alone, just a computer, code, and a system built on anonymity. 6. The Golden Triangle drug trade. The Golden Triangle is one of the most infamous drug-producing areas in the world. Covering parts of Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand, this remote and mountainous region became a center of large-scale opium and heroin smuggling for decades. The story begins with geography. Dense jungles, rugged mountains, and limited government control made the area ideal for illegal activity. Farmers in isolated villages grew opium poppies as a reliable source of income, often having few other economic options. Over time, local warlords and criminal groups organized this production into a powerful and profitable trade. By the mid-20th century, the Golden Triangle had become one of the world's main sources of opium. The raw opium was processed into heroin in hidden jungle labs, then transported across borders using caravans, boats, and later trucks and aircraft. From there, the drugs moved into international markets, reaching Asia, Europe, and the United States. One of the key figures linked to this trade was Kun Sa, a warlord who controlled large parts of the region's heroin production in the 1970s and 1980s. He built a powerful network that operated almost like a private army, protecting smuggling routes and production sites. The scale of the operation was enormous. At its peak, the Golden Triangle supplied a significant portion of the world's heroin. Governments struggled to control the region due to conflict, corruption, and difficult terrain. In later years, increased international pressure and regional changes reduced its dominance, but the legacy of the Golden Triangle remains strong. Why it's among the biggest smuggling operations, produced and exported massive quantities of opium and heroin, operated across multiple countries with weak oversight, used complex land, river, and air smuggling routes, involved powerful warlords and organized networks. The Golden Triangle shows how geography, poverty, and conflict can combine to create one of the largest and most enduring smuggling systems in history. 7. The China-North Korea smuggling networks. The shadowy trade between China and North Korea is one of the most secretive smuggling systems in the modern world. Unlike historical drug empires, this network revolves around a mix of goods: coal, weapons components, fuel, and luxury items, moving quietly across tightly controlled borders. The story unfolds along rivers, remote crossings, and busy ports. Despite strict international sanctions, trade has continued through hidden channels. Small boats cross the Yalu River at night, trucks pass through less monitored checkpoints, and cargo ships change identities to avoid detection. These methods allow goods to flow in both directions, often disguised or misreported. Coal has been one of the most important resources in this trade. North Korea exports it secretly to generate revenue, while luxury goods and technology move the other way, supplying elites and supporting industries. Some networks have also been linked to the movement of restricted materials, making the operation a concern for global security. What makes these smuggling networks unique is their adaptability. When authorities tighten controls in one area, routes quickly shift elsewhere. Traders rely on secrecy, coded transactions, and complex partnerships that stretch across borders. Unlike centralized cartels, this system often operates through smaller, flexible groups that are harder to track. Efforts to stop the trade have increased over the years, with international monitoring and stricter enforcement. Yet the network persists, driven by demand, profit, and political complexity. Why it's among the biggest smuggling operations, involves multiple types of high-value goods, operates despite heavy international sanctions, uses diverse methods, river crossings, shipping, and land routes, constantly adapts to enforcement efforts. This ongoing operation shows that smuggling is not just a story of the past. It continues to evolve, shaped by global politics, economic pressure, and the constant push to bypass restrictions. 8. The hashish smuggling rings of Morocco to Europe. The flow of hashish from Morocco to Europe is one of the largest and longest-running cannabis trafficking routes in the world. Centered in the rugged Rif Mountains, this network has quietly supplied huge portions of Europe's hashish market for decades. The story begins with the land itself. The Rif region offers ideal conditions for growing cannabis: fertile soil, a warm climate, and remote terrain. For many local farmers, cannabis cultivation became a primary source of income, especially in areas with limited economic opportunities. From these mountains, the product is processed into hashish and prepared for transport. The journey north is short but risky. Smugglers move shipments toward the Mediterranean coast, where they attempt to cross into Europe, most often into Spain. The narrow stretch of water known as the Strait of Gibraltar becomes a key crossing point. Smuggling methods vary. High-speed boats race across the water at night, while others hide drugs in trucks, fishing vessels, or even personal luggage. Over time, networks have grown more advanced, using coordinated teams and technology to avoid detection. Once inside Europe, the hashish is distributed through organized crime groups, reaching countries like France, the Netherlands, and beyond. The scale is massive. Year after year, tons of hashish move along this route, making it one of the most important cannabis supply chains in the region. Authorities on both sides of the Mediterranean have worked to disrupt these operations, increasing patrols and surveillance. Still, the trade continues, adapting to new challenges and enforcement tactics. Why it's among the biggest smuggling operations. Supplies a large share of Europe's hashish market, operates across continents with short but strategic routes, uses fast boats, vehicles, and hidden cargo methods sustained by strong demand and economic factors. This network shows how geography and demand can create a powerful smuggling corridor, one that persists despite constant efforts to stop it. 9. The Operation Fast and Furious Scandal. The Operation Fast and Furious is one of the most controversial smuggling-related scandals in modern history. Unlike traditional criminal networks, this operation was led by law enforcement, but its consequences sparked outrage on both sides of the border. In the late 2000s, the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, launched a strategy to track illegal gun trafficking into Mexico. The idea was to allow suspected buyers to purchase firearms illegally and then follow those weapons to higher-level criminals within drug cartels. At first, the plan seemed like a way to uncover major smuggling networks. Guns were bought in the United States and quietly moved across the border, with the hope that authorities could trace them back to powerful cartel leaders. However, the operation quickly spiraled out of control. Many of the weapons were lost track of, disappearing into criminal hands. Instead of exposing entire networks, the guns were used in violent crimes, including incidents that resulted in deaths on both sides of the border. As details emerged, the scandal grew. Critics argued that allowing weapons to walk across the border only strengthened criminal groups rather than stopping them. Investigations followed, raising serious questions about oversight, responsibility, and the risks of such strategies. The controversy intensified when some of the firearms were linked to the death of a U.S. Border Patrol agent. Public trust was shaken, and the operation became a symbol of how dangerous flawed enforcement tactics can be. Why it's among the biggest smuggling-related scandals. Involved large numbers of firearms crossing borders, connected to international cartel activity, highlighted failures in tracking illegal weapons, sparked political and public backlash. This story stands as a cautionary tale. It shows that even efforts meant to stop smuggling can have unintended consequences, especially when control is lost and the stakes are high. 10. The HSBC money laundering case. The HSBC money laundering scandal revealed how financial systems can be used to support massive criminal operations. Unlike traditional smuggling stories involving hidden cargo, this case was about moving illegal money, quietly through banks. In the 2000s, investigations uncovered that HSBC had weak controls that allowed billions of dollars to pass through its system without proper checks. Some of this money was linked to powerful drug cartels, especially from Mexico. These criminal groups needed a way to clean their profits, turning illegal earnings into funds that looked legitimate. The process, known as money laundering, was simple in concept but complex in execution. Large amounts of cash were deposited, transferred across borders, and mixed with legal funds. Over time, the money became difficult to trace, allowing cartels to continue expanding their operations. What made this case so shocking was the scale. billions of dollars moved through the system, raising serious concerns about oversight and accountability in global banking. Reports showed that warning signs had been missed or ignored, allowing suspicious transactions to continue. In 2012, HSBC reached a major settlement with US authorities, agreeing to pay billions in fines. The bank also committed to improving its monitoring systems and compliance measures to prevent similar issues in the future. Why it's among the biggest smuggling-related cases, involved billions of dollars linked to criminal networks, enabled global movement of illicit funds, highlighted weaknesses in financial oversight, connected banking systems to organized crime. This case shows that smuggling isn't just about moving goods, it's also about moving money. Without financial channels, large-scale criminal empires could not survive.